Hello and welcome to another episode of How to Understand X. Today we're going to be talking about something that I'm very much not an expert on, so I don't know why I'm doing this video. I guess I just want to have some fun. But yeah, I'm not good at chess, which is what we're going to be talking about. I know a bit about chess. Like, I've watched quite a few games, I understand how the pieces move, I know what the goal of the game is, and I know what you're supposed to do, but actually doing that in practice is not working out very well. I am aggressively average. I think I fluctuate between 1300 and 1500 at any given moment. So I'm not supposed to be like the greatest instructor in chess, but I was hoping that if we give the perspective of someone who's not good at chess to other people who are not good at chess, then we can kind of mutually do that, like blind leading the blind thing, and find a love for chess, and understand why chess is so amazing. So, what is chess? Chess is an abstract strategy game. I don't know why I was highlighting all those pawns. Chess is an abstract strategy game where the whole point is to checkmate your opponent. Check is when your king, these are kings. Checkmate is when your king is under attack and the king cannot move any further. But before we talk about how checkmating works, we do need to talk about what each piece is. We have 16 pieces, 8 pawns, and then 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, 1 queen, 1 king, and those are both for black and white. This is a zero-sum game, which means that one person wins and one person loses, or you can draw, but that's kind of boring. The whole point of this game is to checkmate your opponent using all 16 of these pieces. And that's one of the most important things in chess, to use all 16 of those pieces to win. Many games have been played without using all 16 of those pieces, and those games tend to be lost. But let's talk about what each of these pieces are. Every horizontal row, before we get into that, every horizontal row we will call from now on a rank, and then every vertical column we will call a file. Files are denoted by letters. We have the A file, the B file, the C file, D file, E file, F file, G file, H file. Then you have the first rank, second rank, third rank, fourth rank, fifth rank, and on and on. But what the only piece that we're going to talk about right now is the pawn. Pawns can only move forward. They can only move forward. And you might see that there are 2 dots highlighted for when I click this pawn. That's because any pawn in its starting position, in the 2nd rank and 7th rank respectively, every pawn in their starting position can move 2 squares forward. E4 is the most common move because it controls the center, but we'll talk about some chess principles in just a second. Just an example, you can move 2 squares forward when you are on the starting position. But when you are not in the starting position, like say black makes a random move, white can only move 1 square forward. 1 square. Right, and then pawns can also do some special stuff. If there is another piece, doesn't have to be a pawn, if there's another piece directly in the pawn's diagonal, then the pawn can actually capture this piece. For example, we have this, and let's say that the opponent makes a horrible, grievous blunder. What does the pawn have in its diagonal? It has nothing right here on d6, and it has a knight on f6. So what can the pawn do? Well, since our opponent did not defend this knight with anything more than a pawn, we simply capture. We capture that knight because it is on this pawn's diagonal. So when you push pawns, you have to be, whenever you develop pieces or move pieces, you need to be conscious of where you are moving them, what pieces can attack it. And the pawn can, again, attack pieces that are directly in its diagonal. And so, let's do another example. This is called a Scandinavian defense. Usually the queen captures after white captures, and then, we'll talk about what the knight can do. But yeah, since this pawn, d5, is in the e4 pawn's diagonal, we can just capture. And from here, there's a lot of moves, but we'll talk about what the queen can do, that piece. in just a little bit. Right now, we do need to talk about the knights because that's the most commonly developed move at the beginning of the game. So the knight can move in these L shapes. They move like that, like that, like that, like that. And the knight is, I think the knight is the only piece other than like the queen that can cover every single square on the board. It'll take them a lot of moves, but the knight can move in such a way. So let's make another pawn move. So again, that black pawn was on the starting position, so it was able to move 2 squares past the starting position. So if the pawn was somehow on there, or any of these squares, it will only be able to move 1 square. And the point of this move was to make sure that white cannot develop any further. For example, let's say that white plays that, black plays that, then white can actually disrupt their structure. Now, black would have to develop their pawns in an unnatural way. They would have to capture right here, for example, or they would have to capture here, because these pawns diagonals are these squares, so they are able to capture. But if they do capture, look what's happened to this pawn. It is going to be very difficult. No, not to this pawn. To this pawn. How are you going to develop it if there is a pawn directly in its face? You can't. So, doubling pawns is not the greatest thing in the world, but it for material it could be useful. White just, I wouldn't say blundered that pawn, but they did mess up black's pawn structure. But white cannot recapture this pawn, or any of these pawns, except for maybe this pawn at a certain point, but yeah, this is probably going to be winning for black. Yeah, by a little bit. But even though black has done that, we have this knight, and it can move in an L shape. L shape. So let's go back to our original. Let's say that this is e4, e5 to stop white from pushing e4 any further. Now let knight go to f3. Knight f3 is another important move because this is the knight's range of motion. It moves in an L shape. It could retreat perhaps, but why would it do that? But it moves in an L shape. The pawn is special because it's the only piece on the board that can capture across its defined range of motion. The pawns can capture across its diagonal, even though they can only move forward. Knights, they can only capture on their defined range of motion, which is an L shape. So let's say that white plays the Van Cruges opening, and then, black plays something like this, and then this. The white knight cannot capture here. The white knight can only capture across its defined range of motion, which is an L shape. So the white knight will have to move, and then, we can attack it further, because, again, this white knight is on this pawn's diagonal. So we will force white to move that knight one more time, because, again, they cannot capture across its defined range of motion. Neither of these pieces are on that, let's draw all of its L's. None of these squares are, going to work, because these two, the pawns, are not on the knight's defined range of motion. So we're going to have to move it back, but, this is not a real game. But, yeah, the knight can only move across its defined range of motion. So when you play e4, e5, the point of knight f3 is, since that this pawn is on this defined range of motion, we want to attack it. We want to capture this pawn, and then we want to bring that back. Capturing, as we said, is when a piece is on another piece's defined range of motion, and then that piece can then capture another piece. So this pawn is in this knight's defined range of motion, so this knight can capture it. And now, the knight will come here, knight c3. This is another very common move. I'll take off the evaluation bar. This is another very common move, because if white captures here, it will have moved into this knight's defined range of motion. So you should always be considering of that, what your opponent has done and what they are defending with their pieces. So yes, the black knight cannot move onto e5 because there's a pawn there, but the black knight is also defending that pawn, so we are not going to be able to capture f5 on e5, excuse me. So the next common move is going to be the bishop b5. There's also, bishop c4, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but bishops only move in diagonals, as you can probably guess. They can cover every single square that they are originally on, so, they can cover every white square, this white square bishop, but it will obviously take them quite a few moves to do that. They can't just, like, teleport. They can only move across the diagonal that they are on. So this is the diagonal. They cannot move through pieces. The knight also can't really move through pieces. It's more like they jump over pieces because that they move in that L shape. They don't move through the pawn. So you can actually just kind of think of it as this being a 2x3 rectangle, and you just go from vertex to vertex. But this is not a math video, so we have bishop b5. This is common, but if you can pause and wonder why this is played, I mean, they kind of tell you, but the reason that this is played is so that, well, at this point, the knight will be on this bishop's defined range of motion. At that point, the bishop can move across any of these squares, but the knight is in that defined range of motion. And, well, if we capture that knight, then we should be able to capture this pawn, because there's nothing going to be defending it. So let's play the Ruy Lopez very quickly. Now, what are the main responses of black? There's the Berlin defense, which we could talk about, but you are probably not going to really play this against many people. There is just so much to do. We'll talk about castling in just a second, but there's just so much theory that I wouldn't recommend playing the Berlin defense as a beginner. I would recommend playing the Morphy's defense. And what does this move do? Pawn a6 attacks this bishop, and once the bishop is being attacked, it cannot capture that pawn because that pawn is defending this pawn. So let's play it real quick. This bishop cannot capture this pawn, which is attacking it, because this pawn is defended. So what are the moves that we have? We can move here, but that seems kind of odd. We can move, well, we can capture, that is true, and, it's a perfectly fine move. You can play a bunch of moves and see how it works, but, this is not going to work because we'll talk about what the queen can do in a second. But you can capture, or you can continue to keep pressure, and that's another important thing. The point of chess is to play because you want to play, right? You want to win, so you shouldn't just meaninglessly trade your pieces. Sure, the bishop and the knight are worth the same amount of material. They're worth exactly 3 points each. So if you say, hey, what if I just capture every single piece that I see, and then it'll be easy to checkmate the king, black will also have opportunities to capture all of your pieces. So this doesn't work as well as you might think. But let's go into what we want. Well, we can capture this knight, and then, pawn captures. Here we cannot capture this pawn because of another defender that will come immediately and then put some pressure on the pawn after us, so they can recapture the pawn. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let's go bishop a4. Now, this continues to keep pressure on this knight, right? Because, well, this knight is still being threatened, and this pawn is still being pressured. Pressure is when you have a piece within your other piece's defined range of motion, so you can threaten to attack it. Now, there are quite a few different moves. There is another, like, Berlinish thing, but, with Morphy's defense played. We can do a very important move called the castling. So let's do a couple random moves. I'm just gonna take off the E-dot bar because this doesn't matter too much. But, let's just play some random stuff. Well, not too random. Let's go back. We have d3, sure. And then, let's go here. Alright. And let's go there. Let's see. Sure, we'll play that. The white king can, well, and we can also move the black king to show how castling can work on both sides. The white king can do a very special move if the white king is not moved from its original position e1 and e8 respectively. The white king can do a move if the rook is also not moved. That's another important thing. The rook starting positions are a1 and h1, and then the king's starting position is e1. Then the black king's starting position is e8, and the rooks are on a8 and h8. The white king can do something very special. It's called castling. It can move 2 squares closer to the rook, and then the rook will go to the square that the king just crossed. So, if we go 2 squares to the right, the king just crossed on f1. So when we castle, the rook will go to f1. And then we can do the same thing with the black pieces, and we can also go 2 squares closer to this rook, but we want to castle queenside. Kingside and kingside. Queenside and kingside are terms for where you are traveling. This is considered castling kingside because the starting position of the king is on this half of the board, and this is castling queenside because the queen's position is on this side of the board. So how would a queenside castle look? As we said, castling is when you move 2 pieces and then the rook goes to where the king just crossed. So we move 2 pieces closer to the rook, and then the rook just goes to where that king just crossed. And so from here, there's obviously so much more to do. But let's talk about what we have learned so far. And I forgot another important pawn move. Once you have a pawn on the 5th rank, let's play a couple random moves. What's there? Once you have a pawn on the 5th rank, these pawns cannot be pushed immediately because of a move called en passant. En passant, or I'm not sure if it's en passant with a hard T. I think it's just en passant. But en passant is important because if a pawn has moved from its starting position 2 squares, and a enemy pawn is on the 5th or 3rd rank, or the 4th rank respectively, sorry. If a enemy pawn is on the 5th, if it's white, or 4th rank if it's black, then you cannot move 2 squares because then the pawn can actually capture across the diagonal. So, just to show, this is a special pawn move, right? So the en passant is another special pawn move. I think the reasoning behind it was that since the pawn can only move 2 squares unless at the starting position, if a white pawn for some reason is already at the starting position, then we can imagine that the black pawn was at the normal range of motion, which is 1 square, and so we can just capture across the diagonal that the pawn just passed. And you can't capture here because it has to be directly diagonal. So let's look back at that one more time. We have this pawn on f7 moved to f5. It moved two places from its starting position, which means that the white pawn can just capture across that diagonal. This is called en passant, and it's a special pawn move, but it can only be done if the enemy pawn is on the 5th or 4th rank, and the pawn is moved 2 spaces from its position. So as we said, once we're at this part, once we captured en passant, this pawn is no longer on the 5th rank, and regardless of how many squares that black pawn moves in its starting position, it will not be en passantable. So let's do that. We cannot en passant right there because our pawn is not on this 5th rank, and we can even show an example, like say here. So let black go. This black pawn is on the 4th rank, which means that we cannot develop these 2 pawns without having to worry about en passant. Just to show that one more time, the starting position, if we jump 2 squares and the black pawn is on the 4th rank or the white pawn is on the 5th rank, we can capture en passant. We go to the we capture on the square that the pawn just passed. En passant means in passing. So yeah, that's another important pawn move. So let's review what we know. We know castling. We know how the pawns move. They move 2 squares at the starting position, then 1 square in every other position, and nice move in L shapes. And bishops move in these kinds of diagonals. So yeah, that was fine, but we do need to talk about these remaining pieces: the rook, the queen, and the king. The rook can move, well, this is not the greatest opening, because the rook is an endgame piece. It moves horizontally, so it can also cover every single square in the board, but it is slightly more useful than a bishop, because bishops can only move across the color that they're originally defined on. Though there's something called a bishop pair that may or may not be worth the same as a regular rook, but yeah, this rook can cover every single square, which is why it's also a very important piece. And it's considered an endgame piece because you don't want to develop your rook too early. It'll make it a target for your opponent to play with. So let's just say we have this, and then from here, say we can't actually move from here to here. This isn't a good move or anything. It's just a way to show how already, in just a couple of moves, we have limited this rook's range of motion and completely invalidated the point of this move, right? So, while you can develop your rook, because it is a very powerful piece, it can move horizontally or vertically, and it can cover every single piece on every single square on the board. But yeah, like this is definitely not the correct way to handle it, and this is considered a trap. This one, because again, look at how our bishop has been developed. There is a bishop that is directly eyeing on this diagonal. A3 has just been developed, so since we have opened up this, what's the point of this move? Like, that's another thing in chess. When you play, you need to have a point to your move. This one, the point of this rook move, I understand, was to develop your pieces, but you need to understand where you are developing them to and why you are developing them. So, yeah, that bishop can just capture, but it's very, very difficult because the bishops cover these 2 squares. Well, the bishops eye those 2 squares. Eye means that across the bishop's original diagonal, they can just kind of see those 2 squares. But since the bishop eyes those 2 diagonals, you're going to have to, if you want to develop your rook, which was the point of a4 or a5, you need to move it up there so that you can, go here, but you run into more issues than it's worth. You can play that, maybe even try and gain this, but yeah, this is not a great place to play, because then you have this, and already black is starting to develop all their pieces. I think I might have said it before. If I have not, development is the most important thing. You have 16 pieces, right? You have 8 pawns, and you have 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, 1 queen, and 1 king. You need to play using all of those pieces. If you have a rook that has not been touched, even though I said we should keep rooks for the endgame, and I do believe that. If you have a rook that has not been touched, a knight that hasn't been moved, a bishop that hasn't been moved, then you are essentially playing without those pieces because they're not doing anything. So development is very important, which is why on that e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop e5, the importance of these moves, it's not really to capture the pawn, even though the point of those moves originally was to capture the pawn. What we've been doing is just developing our pieces. We have moved them out of their starting positions, we are preparing a castle, we want to move all of our pieces outwards, and so that we can get an attack rolling. Because again, the importance of chess, or the point of chess, is to just checkmate your opponent. So, yeah, let's go. What should we do now? Oh, forgot. We do have the king and the queen. The king can move, the king can move 2 squares when it castles, but it cannot move, actually, let me talk about another blunder with this knight opening. Development is obviously very important, but you need to know what you are developing. This bishop, it is being developed here, but what is it doing? Right? Sure, it's technically eyeing that pawn, but knight move the knight move to f3 to attack this pawn, and if you're not doing anything to defend it, then what's the point of this move? Either you defend this pawn, right, or you counterattack, or you can play something, but you need to have moves that make sense. This is the elephant gambit because then you can capture there, you can capture there, maybe. So should you capture here or should you capture there? I would argue that it's a lot better to just capture. Well, I mean, both are relatively playable. I think this will most likely be a blunder because the queen can just move there and then put some pressure on this pawn, and the king actually is still on the starting square. But let's see, what's the correct way to handle this? Yeah, probably this one. Because if queen moves there, this is just like the well, I haven't told you the Scandinavian defense, but if the queen captures this pawn because it is on this range of motion, we didn't even talk about the queen yet. Okay, let's talk about the king first. So e4, e5, and I'm going to show you a move that you should never do, and that is king e2. We'll have king e7 as well, and what the king can move is, if you just look at the king's range of motion, it is every surrounding square, except for the one that is currently on. So it can only move one square in any diagonal, in any vertical movement. It can only move one square. So that's a pawn, but so let's go king e3, king d3, king d, and let's, just to show you how this works, what are these squares that the king can move? Right, we can move here. It is on this diagonal. We cannot move here. This king can move, well, let's look at where the king can move. Unlike it can move every single place that there is not a piece, so it can't move there, there, or there, and it can move where squares aren't being defended. So these two squares are being defended by the pawn right here, so we can actually not capture there. And the king cannot move here, because even though the king could technically capture the king and then the pawn can capture the king, once the king has quote-unquote captured the king, the game is immediately over. The checkmate idea is, it's not really you are taking the king, it's just the king cannot make any legal moves, so that's considered checkmate. When the king is being attacked and he can't make legal moves. But if we think about this in the context of history, what this game was originally supposed to be, it's a game of war, right? And if you essentially move your king directly into your opponent king's face, then this king will just capture, and you won't even have time to recapture with your pawn because you would have just essentially lost. You lost your king. But yeah, so the king can move here. It cannot move here because the king is defending that square. It can move here, that is true. It can move here, it can move here, but it cannot move here. Let's see. Yeah, it can move all of these squares because that's one square away. It cannot move here because the pawn defends it. It cannot move here because the king defends it. And it cannot move here or here because the bishop defends it. And so that's how the king moves. It moves exactly one square unless it is about to be attacked. And let's talk about the queen. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board, so we'll just randomly develop it real quick. Yeah, this is another chess principle. The queen is very powerful, but it's like the rook in that you don't want to develop it too early. It'll make it a target very quickly. That knight can have this very nice developing move here, and automatically, what are you doing, right? You've just I wouldn't say you've blundered or anything, but you do have a developed queen, but nothing else. And the computer might be fine with it because you did move your queen out, but most humans would rather not do this because let's look at what this looks like, right? Because look at all the pieces that black has already developed. They have developed their knight, they've developed their bishop, they're ready to move 2 squares to the rook with their king, and then let their rook go to where the king had just passed, so they're ready to castle, and they're ready to go, knight c6, they can push pawns now, all of that for one central pawn. How many pieces has white developed? Pawns don't count as developed pieces. You can push them, sure, but they're not actually developed. So, yeah, it's like white is technically better because they are a pawn up, but white's position is definitely much worse. Even now, Stockfish, or the computer evaluation, is giving black the advantage because black has pieces developed. They have more of a chance to attack things. They can start, playing to win, but white is desperate. They need to start moving their pieces as quickly as possible, which is why the top engine move is going to be knight c3, then you probably have like d4, and then, this, and probably capture in there. Knight moves. This idea that you just push this pawn, and then you just move your queen. This violates a chess principle because while the queen is very powerful, it becomes a target extremely quickly, and you do not want to allow this. You want to have your queen tucked in until it actually needs to do something. But what can the queen do? We were talking about how it's very powerful, but the queen can move on any diagonal, any column, and any row that it is on, except if there is a piece there. So the queen can move across any row that it's on, so it can move across this row. It cannot move across this row because the queen is not on that square, but it can move across this row, or rank. It can move across this file, it can move across this diagonal, it can move across this diagonal, and let's even show another. That's actually not the, let's do this. So king is in check because it's being attacked, and then knight's supposed to defend it, but I was just doing that to show where the queen can move. The queen can move here, 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 across every diagonal that it currently is on, and every square on the column and row that it's on. So this is called centralizing your queen. Obviously you shouldn't do it at the very beginning because you won't get this kind of a position, but in the middle game and end game, it is very important to centralize your queen because it can move across so many different squares. Look, all of these squares on this diagonal, all of the squares on this diagonal, every square on the column and row that it's on, all of it. The queen can just move anywhere it wants across any of those squares, which means that it has a lot more chances to attack things. And you might be thinking, oh, we can attack that knight, right? But again, you have to think of every single piece's range of motion every time you even think about making a move. I forget the exact quote, but it's like, if you find a good move, find a better one. And that's very emblematic of what chess is about. Every single time you play something, every time you think about playing something, really, really consider, am I playing the best move that I can currently play? Is this move going to hurt my chances of winning in any way? And, on and on. But every single move has to have a point to it. So let's go back to the Ruy Lopez, one of the oldest, most classical, positions of all time, and that's, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop e5. And, from here there is lots of theory. There's the Morphy's defense, there's this, there's just so much. You can do all sorts of stuff. But, the whole point of this was to develop your pieces as quickly as possible, right? You've developed your bishop, your knight, and black could either develop their knight, that's another important thing, and you can't capture really here to capture there because then, knight captures here, queen can come over here, put a lot of pressure along this position, so it's definitely best to just castle. But, yeah, I mean, there's just so much to every single position. I think there's like a couple trillion possibilities of how a game can like go after 5 moves, or even just during the first 5 moves. But yeah, let's see. They're also talking about d6, the Philidor's defense. This is another way to defend this pawn. You can't actually... I wouldn't really recommend this to any beginners, even though you have opened up this diagonal for the bishop, you have closed this diagonal for the pawn, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to defend this pawn, or to kind of attack this pawn. Okay, it's going to be difficult to develop this bishop. I don't know what I was talking about, but, you know, there is a way to do it, and we'll talk about some more advanced chess ideas now. So, there are two weird moves. We have the Nimzovich-Larsen attack. Yep, Nimzovich-Larsen. And this is a modern attack. I wouldn't recommend any of these ideas unless, you know, you are already playing at a relatively high level. So, let's go this. This is I think somebody played it very recently. I forget who it was, but the point of moves like g6 and pawn to g3, or b3 and pawn to g2 or g6. Okay, pawn to b2 or pawn to b2. Pawn to b2 or pawn to b6. I can speak English. I know I can. But the point of these kinds of moves is to move your bishop onto this diagonal. This is a very important diagonal. When you move your bishop, let's go back to the original starting position. We'll go back to the Nimzovich-Larsen attack. This is called the Queen Fianchetto's opening, because this move, when you move your bishop from its starting position one square to the left or one square to the right of its starting position, and you were eyeing across this diagonal, this is called a fianchetto. Fianchettos are very important because they cut the board in half. It controls the most amount of squares. Like, let's just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It controls every single square that the bishop can at any given moment control. And it eyes that rook. Again, most people will not just, you know, go for the rook immediately, but you can't. If you push this, well, let's do some random move. Let's say we have this. Yeah, this is, you can't push this. So let's say, you know, we have this. You can't push this pawn to fianchetto your bishop, because then bishop will just capture that rook. So it is very important. Well, I wouldn't say it's, you know, necessary to fianchetto your bishop, but if you are ever stuck in a position where you can't fianchetto your bishop, when you can fianchetto your bishop, it usually is better because it stops the development of this pawn. It hinders this bishop's development, because let's come up with a random move. Let's say you play d4, and then, you know, bishop here, and let's say that, so that you can develop this bishop. You can't develop it immediately, because, imagine, how many pieces are defending this pawn? Knight moves in an L shape, so it can't defend this pawn. Rook can only move horizontally, so it's not defending this pawn. The only thing that's defending this pawn is this bishop. So if you tried to, you know, develop it, this is immediately abundant, because not only are you losing this pawn, you also can't move this rook. It is being blocked by both the knight and the pawn. So yeah, this is definitely very good for white and very bad for black, but fianchettoing is an important middle game to, like, end of beginning game type of idea, because you want your bishop to be eyeing that rook, to be eyeing that very weak g7 pawn, and to hinder the development of this bishop. So fianchettos have lots of practical applications, and we'll also talk about something called a double attack. Let me go to, let's see, the pin. Okay, so yeah, this is called a pin. You can't move your pieces in a way that, well, you can't move your pieces in a way that it'll be on the same file or rank or diagonal that the king can be attacked on. So this move right here, this is a very powerful move, because from here, your knight can't move. If it moves here, then your king will be, quote-unquote, captured. You can't let that happen. And so any of if the bishop is on the same diagonal as the king and there is a piece in between, you cannot move this knight, because then your bishop, or the white bishop, will just capture your king, which is, again, gonna win the game for white. So from here, we'll just take this. And let's see, what is another pin? We have both the rook and the king are on this diagonal of black squares. So if we move that bishop, then this rook will not be able to move. And it's not being defended by anything. So we'll just be able to capture that. And so, you don't have to pin the king either. There are definitely pieces that are quote-unquote worth more than other pieces. As we said, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board, followed by the rook, and then usually bishop to knight, then pawn, even though some people might prefer knights to bishops because of something called a double attack or a fork, which we will talk about. But we have the queen and then the rook on the same diagonal. This will win us an exchange, or a piece if black makes some grievous error. But the point of this move is if this if this rook moves to kind of protect itself, then, let's just play this move really quickly. If the bishop moves, then, they won't let me do that, but you will capture the rook, and even though the queen will have captured, it would, the queen was right here, right? Yeah, no, it would have gone here. If the bishop was right there, and the rook was right there, queen was right there, and the queen had to move because it didn't want to be on the same diagonal as this bishop, then when you captured the rook with the bishop, even though you have recaptured with the queen, you are up material. Material is how many pieces or strong pieces you have. So, a way to describe this would be so a rook is worth more than a bishop. Let's talk about how much each piece is worth. A pawn is worth 1 point. A knight or bishop is worth 3 points. The king is obviously worth everything and nothing, because if you checkmate the king or capture the king, then you're lost. And then the queen is worth 9 points. So if the rook is worth more than a bishop, if you can capture the rook with a bishop, most of the time it's going to be good. That's because rooks can move across any single square on the board, but bishops can only move on diagonals, so it can only move on the squares that it was on at the starting. And now this is called exploiting the pin. What is being pinned? The king is right here, right? And then the knight is right here. We have a rook already on the same file as the king and as this knight. Now, we need to come up with a move that can attack this knight. We can't just capture the knight, because then pawn will capture here. And black will have 3 pawns, and white will have 3 pawns. There won't be a pawn here because it will capture the knight, but yeah, black will have 3 pawns and white will have 3 pawns, and that's usually a completely drawn endgame, even though black has something called a pawn island. A pawn island is when you have 2 connected pawns, like they are either on the same diagonal or same rank, same diagonal or same rank. It's usually not on the same file because, again, double pawns are not the greatest. It'll be very difficult to, target this pawn. So how do we exploit this pin? Well, if we know that we can't capture it, how do we threaten this knight? We need to have something else attack it, because if something else attacks it, this knight cannot move. Your king will be in check. So the way to exploit this pin is to just move your move your pawn, so that you can capture this knight. Again, you might be thinking, oh, why didn't the knight, well, can't move here because that pawn is defending that square, but why couldn't it move here? Well, again, you cannot let your king be captured. The point of this game is to quote-unquote capture the opponent's king, or to put it in checkmate, where the king has no legal moves and it is under attack. So once you've done this, you just capture that, and you've just completely won. Now, this one's interesting. Okay, so, I'm not sure if this is gonna work or not. We'll see. Um, we have, this is a bit of a more complicated position, but we do have quite a few things happening, right? We have this bishop. It is fianchettoed, as we said. It is eyeing this entire diagonal. It is, cutting this board in half. We have this queen eyeing this pawn, and, has some random squares, but it's not doing anything. And these rooks are also not doing too much. They are inhibited by the pawns and by themselves. So the the white pieces also aren't really doing too much. And what's this knight doing? Well, the point of this game is to checkmate your opponent, right? But we have pinned pieces. If this bishop captures this knight, let's think about this. If the bishop captures this knight, the pawn, you might think, oh, it's on the same diagonal as the pawn, then, we can just capture. Let's do that one more time. The pawn can just capture this knight, right? Or the bishop after the bishop captures the knight. But that's not going to work because, again, queen and king are on the same file. If you have a rook on the same file as a king, or a bishop on the same diagonal as a king, or, a knight within reach of a king, it's very important to know that you cannot capture with any piece if it's on that same diagonal, because you will be moving your pieces off the original file that it's being attacked on. So if we capture this pawn, we can't do anything. And at that point, so here, when this pawn moved there, it's because he didn't want to be checkmated, right? Because if we have this pawn, and say our opponent makes a dumb move, like they just capture this pawn, well, they're not going to capture that, they're not that dumb, but let's say they moved here, maybe, or let's say that they're relatively competent and they try to develop their rook, right? Since that bishop's right there, and this pawn is very weak, it is not being defended by anything other than the king, we can just capture that pawn. And the king cannot capture, because the queen is being defended by that bishop. So if we captured here, again, we cannot capture back with the pawn, because the pawn is being pinned by this queen. It's on the same file as this queen. And so once you're at this part, and let's say your opponent makes a careless mistake, you can capture this pawn, and you would have checkmated the king, because the king cannot move anywhere, right? Cannot move on top of its own pieces, and it cannot capture this queen because it's being defended by the bishop. So, yeah, I don't know how to pause this, game thing, but, okay, this is an interesting position. How would I play this? I'm not sure. Let's see. I'll try to work this out. We have, this knight is under attack, right? It's under attack twice, because this rook is eyeing this knight, and this rook is also eyeing this knight. And this rook is, this knight is being defended twice, right? There is a king and a knight defending it, but immediately what I see is, what if this knight captured this pawn? So we attack that knight another time. Well, there's a couple moves that black can make at that point. They can capture right there, in which case we'll capture with this, and if that captures, then we capture with this, and then we're up the exchange, which I think is correct, but let's just explain our thought process. So we have this knight, it's being attacked twice. King cannot capture this rook because it's being defended by this other rook, but this knight is being attacked twice and defended twice. So I think we can just move the knight and attack this piece another time. Let me do those arrows again. Being attacked twice, being defended twice. So let's just attack it another time. So white can move, it can capture this knight, of course, but we have that rook, and this rook is only being defended once, right? So if we capture this rook captures this rook, and this rook captures this rook, then we'll be up the exchange. A rook is more powerful than a knight. So I think that's correct. Yep. And okay. Won't let me play that through. Let me try and see if it plays it through. Analysis. Okay. Yeah. let's go back to what we were talking about. This captures there. Either you can capture here, in which case, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, and then you'll just be off the exchange. Or, as the computer evaluates, you should just let this kind of happen, Sure, you'll be down a full pawn, but you will not be down in exchange by attempting to capture that. But, same thing with this. You will be down the exchange, and this is winning far more. But, the best, I actually miscalculated that. The best way for black to handle this is to just kind of let this happen, You defend the square twice, so let's go over what the computer wants us to do. It wants us to defend this rook, because this rook is being attacked twice, right? It's being eyed by this, and eyed by this, and it's only being defended once by this rook. And you can't move this king to try and defend it, because then this rook will be defended twice and attacked 3 times. So by the end of it, we can even show that, by the end of it, you will just be up a piece, up a rook if you wanted to capture everything, but you probably would just let this knight exist. So yeah, they want us to defend this square so that when we capture, there is no compensation. Black is just down a full pawn. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns. So it's not technically, equal or anything, but this is where you need to start taking stock of these things. This pawn cannot move any further. It's being hindered by this pawn, and these 2 pawns are doubled. This pawn is, perfectly fine. Well, these 2 pawns are perfectly fine, They are making sure that white or black cannot further develop any of these pawns. They can't go any further, because then you'll just capture, or at the very least trade down until there's no more pawns left, which means that this pawn is very weak, and it'll be easy to kind of stop these pawns from further advancing. Now, on this side, we have 2 white pawns and 1 black pawn. So if we say, from here to here, this is obviously not as much of a winning position, because there's a lot more nuances, and the king is pretty unpredictable. The endgame is the hardest part of the game to actually, calculate. But yeah, at some point you might be able to trade this pawn for this pawn, and then you'll have this outside pawn that might be able to eventually become a queen. And in case I didn't say that, let's just kind of make some moves, right? This, and let's just say that, our opponent falls asleep, right? Let's say our opponent makes some very stupid moves, and this is how the game will look, right? Let's see how much this is winning by. Yeah, by quite a bit. So what's happening right here? Well, we want to defend our pawn, so let's just let the computer do this. We don't want to push this pawn, because then we'll move within this knight's range of motion, but we can just, move with our king, try and defend this. We can't move here because this is also covered by the knight's range of motion, and the computer very briefly mentioned that we should maybe go here. Now, this is a funny move, because if we capture here, then king will capture there, and this is just a plain draw. Once you get to here, you can't actually push this any further, because then the black king will be able to, do some stuff. But, yeah, that would be a draw. But once you kind of avoid that trade, let's do that. Once you avoid this trade, either black king captures that knight, in which case you can capture this, and there's something called the square of the pawn. If you draw a square from where the pawn is to, the end of the board, and then just try and see, the king is not within the square. So let's just let's make some random moves. Let's even take this king completely out of the way. This is the square of the pawn. if you draw a square or if you draw a line from where the pawn is to the queening square, to the square where it actually promotes, and then you just draw a square from that to the same side lengths on all sides, then if the king is within this square, it'll be able to stop it. The king is not within this square for this pawn, so if the king attempts to, capture it, it won't be able to. And this idea that if you get your pawn from the starting position all the way to the 8th file, or the first file if you're playing black, it can promote, is the most important idea in the endgame. As you can see, everything on this side of the pawns is fixed. Nothing is happening on this side of the board, right? If you move this, then black capture, and they might even be able to promote on their own. But the important thing is you are trying to queen your pawn. You're trying to promote it, or it doesn't even have to be a queen. You can maybe under promote and then be able to, play some funny stuff. Like maybe if you under promote to a bishop, you'll be fine. I think you'd still be winning, yeah, because then you can just kind of play here, and obviously, the black king will try and stop you from going here and capturing all of these pawns like that. But, you can just very slowly kind of grind it out. And once you get to a point where, you can do this, they'll just let you play. And then, you can go here. You can even play something funny, like sacrifice a piece because you are up quite a bit of material. But, why would you do any of that? They want you to move your king. So opposition is another important idea. This is called opposition. When the kings are facing one another. I feel like I'm just jumping from topic to topic. But let's go back to the pin. We'll talk about opposition in a little bit. And let's go on to this next example. Okay. This is mate in 2, apparently. So, let's see what this would look like. Alright. So, immediately I see that this pawn is pinned, right? You cannot capture, or you cannot recapture if this pawn's ever captured, because this bishop and this king are on the same diagonal. So since this bishop and this king are on the same diagonal, we can capture with the queen, right? When we capture with the queen, this pawn cannot recapture, and this pawn is only being defended, quote-unquote defended, because it can't actually recapture. This pawn is only being defended by that pawn. So when we capture with this, you can't do anything. And of course, black attempts to prevent, checkmate, but, well, we're just gonna checkmate, right? Because this bishop, well, let's look at how many squares the king can move. It cannot move any of these. It can only move these 3 squares, right? And it actually can't move there either. So once we capture here, since this queen is being defended by this bishop, you can't actually, recapture with the king, and the king will have no legal moves. So, yeah, we look back at this pin, we notice that this pawn cannot defend this pawn. When you have this pawn, it is pinned. So whatever it is defending can be captured. You can't recapture because then you'll move the pawn from the diagonal that the king is occupying alongside the bishop. So this would just be the white opponent will capture. So, okay. They wanted to play a slightly different move, but, let's look at what the legal moves are. Well, there's no legal moves that the king has, so all you need to do is just put it in check. So, there we go. Okay, interesting. Okay. There's obviously a lot happening right now. So, what do we see here? We see that the queen and the queen are eyeing one another, and they're on the same diagonal. So, that's also double-sided. If we do not move with tempo, tempo is an important idea. Tempo is getting a move from playing it. So, if you do not move with tempo, then the white queen will just capture the black queen. Tempo is important because if you make a move that allows white to consolidate or to make a move of their own, then you will just be completely losing. This black queen is not being defended by anything. It's on a white square. We have a dark square bishop. This rook is on a diagonal, not on a rank or file, so this is a completely undefended queen. So what are the tactics that we can use? Well, we can do some stuff. I was thinking perhaps we can capture here, because this cannot be captured, right? Oh, I have an idea. Okay, this will be a double pin, I think. But if we capture here, you might think, oh, no, we're just losing our queen, right? Because queen and queen are occupying the same diagonal. But when we capture this, we will be moving with check. This white king has to respond. And we cannot capture with this queen because, again, this queen is being pinned by the black queen. So if we capture here, queen will capture, well, can't capture here. So the only legal move is to move there. And then, look where the king is moved. It's moved on the same diagonal as this bishop. So this pawn can't actually capture right there. So if we go here, king has to move here. And it will be occupying the same diagonal as this bishop. And then, if we move the rook back, well, the rook could potentially move there, but why would you do that? The rook cannot be captured by this pawn because it's being pinned. So let's do that, see if I got it correct. Okay. And yeah, so let's go back. At this point, the pawn cannot capture the rook. If it could, then, this would obviously be very much losing. But the pawn cannot capture the rook. The queen must capture the rook because, it's on the same file. This queen is also being pinned. This is the same file. So from here, the best move, you can't capture with this. You could maybe move that, but, you'd just be giving up this for free. Actually, no, that would just be immediate checkmate because, let's go back to analysis. So let's see what we did. We had to do this, move with tempo. Queen cannot capture because it's being pinned by this black queen. They're on the same diagonal. So only legal move is king there. Now we move here because this pawn is being pinned by this bishop. So what is the only move? Well, the only move that makes sense is capture there. But if you, for some reason, moved your king, then this will just be checkmate. But yeah, this just prolongs the game for a little bit, but this is obviously going to be very much losing. So yeah. I'm hoping that was fun. Let's do a little bit of practice with, what's it called? Double attacks, and, well, we could talk about skewers. Well, skewers and pins are very similar, so let's just do the fork. The fork is one of the best things that the knight is capable of. So, what is the fork right now? This is a royal fork. It is where, let's talk about what this definition is. It is a tactic where a single piece makes 2 or more direct attacks simultaneously. So, if you have 2 or more attacks, and one of those attacks is on a piece that is more powerful or more important than the other piece, then you just capture the other piece if it's not defending it. For example, if you move here, both the queen and the knight will be in the both the queen and the king will be in the knight's range of motion. So you could actually capture. Well, you could technically kind of capture the king, but you'd just be moving your king somewhere. So we move there, and since the king had to move, it was in check. We simply capture this queen. Okay. We have another knight fork. Let's see. Interesting. Okay. So, let's see. Well, we have a queen that's eyeing this entire diagonal. We have a knight that's eyeing this rook. And we have this hanging knight right here. So what would be a good way to handle this situation? I don't know, actually. Let me think about this for a bit. Oh, okay. I think I see where we're supposed to go with this. So, again, let's take stock of everything that's happening. We have a knight that's attacking this rook. We have a queen that's eyeing this diagonal. We have a queen that's attacking this bishop. That's attacking this knight. So what's the best way to handle this situation? I would not recommend doing this unless you absolutely think that, well, it's not absolutely, you have to know that this will work. But we can move this queen here, right? How many legal squares does Black's king have? None. It has to capture the queen because the queen is undefended. So if we go here, yep, king has to capture. And now we have a fork between the knight, between the queen and the king, because we go like here, knight's range of motion, LL, we're going to just capture that and win there. And this is called a pawn fork. This is also a very common thing that you'll see. Usually 2 pieces and for a rook is a perfectly fine trade. In fact, many people would actually prefer 2 pieces for a rook, but right now we have a bishop and a knight, and they're on the same diagonal, or not the same diagonal, they're on the same file, same rank, okay, same rank, and if we were to push this pawn, it would attack this and this, and you might be thinking, oh, well, bishop can move across diagonals, it'll just capture, and it will, but this rook is defending that pawn, so when we do that, oh, well, I mean, it's also still losing, but, you know, that's interesting. And, yeah. What? Okay. That was definitely not the way to play that, because then, you know, you just capture. But, whatever. Okay, so this is the same idea, right? We have 2 pieces, same rank, and they are not defending one another. Or they are defending one another, but we can just push this pawn. We push this pawn, and what's it defending? It's being defended by the queen. So when we push this pawn, we just capture, and we're up a piece. And this is a rook fork. So we have, this one is exclusively files and ranks. So we have a bishop and a king on the same rank, right? And so since we have them on the same rank, and we have a rook that can attack across ranks and across files, we know that if we move this rook across on the same rank as this knight, as this king, it'll be able to capture this bishop. And you know, same concept here. Oh wait, this will be a bishop fork because we actually did this. Well, not exactly this, but we did a pin where the rook could not move if it was right there, but the rook can also not move because the king is in check. That's another thing. So we do have to do that. The king has to move. You cannot move the rook. You cannot protect the rook. It's just it's fodder for the bishop to capture because the king must need to avoid check. Now, okay, this one's interesting. I think no, there's not gonna be that because oh, okay. So, yeah, I was kind of having the sort of right idea. I see that this this king and this rook are on the same rank, and we have a queen that can readily attack this rook. But when you attack this rook, you also put the king into check, so it has to move somewhere, right? And once you have that king in check, you just capture. So, yeah. And this isn't like super easy to convert. We'll just go into analysis board, or yeah, let's go into analysis. This isn't going to be like the easiest thing in the world to convert. Knights are some of the most unpredictable pieces. Even though they can move across every single square, coordinating them is going to be rather, you know, annoying. And, you know, we're just going to try and attack this pawn. If that's not allowed, we're going to have to, well, put some pressure on the knight. And so, you know, we just kind of play it out. it's a lot more difficult to convert this win than you'd think. You know, like there's so many more moves than like a couple of them, but eventually, two pieces for a queen is not a favorable trade. Eventually, you will win, but yeah, it's definitely tricky. And okay, uh, I don't know what that is. So okay, is that what it's asking me to do? Oh, yeah. So you have to try and prevent this, right? If this knight goes here, both the king and the rook will be in the range of motion, and since the king has to move, you'll just lose this rook. So the best move for black is to move here. You might be thinking, oh, what if I just kind of defend that square? Well, the pawn is eyeing that square, so it'll just capture. So the best move in this position would just be to move it, take the loss, and so yeah. And this is very much winning. You might be thinking, oh, we both have a rook, but 3 pawns against 4 pawns, this is more than you could possibly ask for. But yeah, even though we both only have a rook, 4 pawns is definitely, 7 pawns is definitely better than 3 pawns. So let's see what's being doubly attacked. Okay. So automatically what I see is that we have quite a bit of pressure along this king. It cannot move anywhere. We have a knight that's somewhat ready to jump in as necessary. We have this queen that's somewhat oddly placed. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. But there's one very good move that we do need to find. Okay, so I'm thinking that, well, again, we know that the queen is eyeing a bunch of things, right? So I was thinking maybe we might be able to threaten some stuff right here. If we have the knight over here, just imagine if black falls asleep for a bit. If we have a knight right here and a queen right here, the king will not have any legal moves, so that would be checkmate. But what if the pawn captures? Oh, yeah, no. If the pawn captures, that's immediate checkmate because this, all of these squares are covered, right? Let's go back to the king cannot move anywhere here. So if you capture here, and pawn is still there, then if you move your bishop here, then it will not be, your king will not be able to move there, so it will have no legal moves. I think that's correct. Oh, and they just give up their queen because they cannot afford to get checkmated. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, no, okay. Let's see. Ooh. Oh, okay. So, again, I would not recommend queen sacks until you know exactly how it's going to work. Queen sacks must, any sacrifice should be forcing, but queen sacks must be forcing because queens are obviously the most important piece on the board. They can move anywhere. So if we sacrifice our queen, the king has to capture. Cannot move here, cannot move here, cannot move here, cannot move here. You have to capture. And when you do, the king will be, let's erase all this. The king will be on this square, the queen will be on this square, and the knight's range of motion goes over there. So we'll just capture that queen. And, yep. Let's see. Okay, we have, what are we playing? We're playing white. Okay. Well, let's see. I'm thinking automatically that check will fork those two. And you can't really recapture because it'll be defended by the knight. Well, no, but by that point we'll just be up a full piece. So I think it's that. Yep. And what should we capture with? I think we should just capture. No? Oof. Yeah, okay. Let's see why this doesn't work. You go here, the king is on this square. Then, yeah, you have to recapture with the knight, and the king will recapture, so it'll just be a pawn against a pawn. And, you know, the white king will be in that square of the pawn, so it's not too big of a deal, but black will definitely be in the square of this pawn. So there's no way that we're going to be queening, no way that he's going to be queening, or they're going to be queening, and we're just drawn. So, yeah, that's the correct first move. Now, let's see. If we go here, he goes... this is... let's think. So if we go there, they go there. We might just need to add another attacker. Actually, no, that doesn't work, because if you try and do that, you know, you'll just be lost. Let's see. It's definitely not that, because you know, you can capture that. Oh, that might be, you know, worth it. Let's see if that's what you're supposed to do. No? Oh. Yeah, no, obviously. So, again, I did not follow my own advice, so let's do this one more time. So, again, we did have a forcing move. You could move there, but, you know, you just lose a piece, because then that rook would capture, and then this rook would capture. But, so, you want to defend this bishop. Right, but then, from here, only legal move is queen there. I mean, king there. So if you move this, king has to avoid check. First thing we need to know. King has to avoid check. It only has one legal move, and that's this square. And from there, king and rook are both in the range of motion of the knight. Then we'll be able to capture that. Yeah. And let's see, we have a lot happening. So we are black, right? And what threats do we have? We have this kind of a threat right here. If we move there, then king has to move there. That's forced, so automatically start looking at checks and seeing what they can do. But what's the continuation after that? Once they do that, you can't really sacrifice. Well, yeah, no, you can't really sacrifice, because once the king recaptures, what are you going to do? So let's see. This rook is also not doing too much. This knight can jump and attack stuff, but what is it really doing? So I am kind of thinking this might be a little bit too crazy, but I'm thinking we push this pawn up here. Can it capture? No, it can't, because no queen there. Because what I want to do is I want to get to a point where, you know, this queen should be there. I want this to go here, and then from there, maybe, let's see. Okay. They just gave the exchange? I don't know. Yeah, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, this is another combination of pins. So, if we go knight check here, pawn can't capture here because the queen will capture. And so, again, this cannot happen because bishop is there. So we move here, and then once the knight, once we move here, and the king is right there, queen will be right there, and we can move there, but almost definitely white will just sacrifice the exchange. What? Oh. Wait, what? Let's see. King H1. Okay, so... Huh. I don't know why this doesn't work. Knight G3. Oh. Wow. That's unbelievable. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm not, like, the greatest at this game or anything, but, you know, that was... Wow. It's very interesting. Okay, I don't know why it's asking me to continue playing. I mean, do I have to convert this? Capture that, maybe? I mean, that would be hanging, but, you know, don't... Oh, is it just that? It's probably just that, right? Yeah. Oh, doesn't want me to redo it correctly, so let's review. We did this to kind of open up the king a little bit, at least hope to, and he just captured. So we go over here, and so our opponent cannot capture with the pawn because it's pinned by the queen, so the only legal move, we can't move here because the bishop is covering that square. So the king only has one legal move, and when we do another check, at that point the king has no legal moves. So we just force this capture, which means that the rook is no longer defending this square, which our original knight was on. So we can go here, and since the king and the queen are both within the knight's range of motion, you just capture the queen. So just to show it one more time, yeah, that's very crazy. It's cool though. So let's see what we have. We have a fork challenge with the queen. So let's see what this would look like. Automatically I'm thinking there, because if you know you capture, then it's just lost. I think it has to be that, right? Are we playing white? Oh, that's a little bit more difficult. Okay, so white to play. Okay. Huh. So I see that pawn is hanging, right? But then, what's the continuation after that? I don't see anything too concrete. King can still, you know, move most of the squares that he needs to go. So what will our opponent do then? Ooh, okay. Maybe that's important. Maybe, you know, you might be able to do some kind of a fork here. Let's see if that's... Okay. Yeah, okay. That's the fork. Let's see why that was forced. So these squares are all covered by the queen's diagonal movement, right? And this square is covered by the vertical movement. So you either move here, in which case your king is very much passive, it's not playing anything, or you can move here with the king, which is slightly better, but still, once you move there, both your rook and your king are on the same white square diagonal, and so when you do that, you capture the pawn, and you just take this. And this is extremely winning, because, let's go back. I mean, it'll be difficult to convert, because queen and pawn endgames are the most difficult to fully hold. But from here, I mean, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against 3 pawns, so it's completely winning, but definitely going to be harder to actually convert. Now, what are the forks we have right now? Well, let's see. This bishop is very much targeting this entire diagonal, right? First thing we notice, this bishop is a monster bishop. It's just completely covering that entire diagonal. So if some type of check were to happen, then what would white be able to do, right? They would have to, you know, move here, and that's definitely not the best place. It can be attacked quite a bit from there. So Let's see. I'm thinking maybe it's not gonna be. We could threaten some mate threats because if we can somehow get our queen onto that square, then there will be no legal moves for white, and that'll be a checkmate. But let's see. We can't just sacrifice needlessly, I don't think, for nothing. Okay, so if we can't actually, pull off this, what other threats exist? Well, if we can somehow get our rook or our queen to that square, we would be able to checkmate. Because let's think. So we have this bishop is covering all of these squares in this diagonal, right? And if somehow we could get this something to check the king, so if there was nothing on this rook, if we could somehow get this rook off of this file, or at least away from this for a little bit, we can check the king, move him there, and then from there we can attack our opponent one more time, and then just put our rook there, because then he'll have no legal moves, right? Because this bishop is covering all of these two squares, and the king cannot recapture the rook. So how do we get this rook off of this? I think we could do a queen sacrifice. Let's see, because if we move our queen and they capture, then we just move our rook. And that will go there. We just go there, right? I think that's fine. Oh, and they just... Oh! Yeah, no. That was not good. Let's do that one more time. Yeah. You have tunnel vision sometimes. Tunnel vision is also something that you should very much remember. Tunnel vision is when you are playing a game and you have a very clear plan of attack. You have a very clear plan of anything. It could be defense, it could be attack. You have an idea of what you're doing, but you focus so much on what you are doing that you actually don't even think about what your opponent is doing. I'm obviously, not above this. I constantly have tunnel vision because I think I'm kind of like Adolf Anderson in a way. I'm really obsessed with the idea of beauty, of having like these really flashy sacrifices or gambits, and I want to have like a very good game. But it's probably better for people at our level who just kind of play as barbarians, play one move threats and just be brutal about it. We don't have to be pretty about how we play, but I was having a lot of tunnel vision because I thought I would very quickly be able to checkmate, but yeah, no, you add another checkmate threat of right here, because then the bishop and the queen will be attacking that square, and you can't checkmate there, so you just capture them. Alright. Interesting. Okay, so we have two last little problems. So what is going to be how we play this? Okay. Yeah, so this is a fork. I'm cheating. I'm looking at what this question is asking. It's asking for a pawn break, I'm pretty sure. So, if we move here, and then that captures, then the queen is opened up. But I don't know why that would not work. It's the only pawn break that I think makes any sense. Let's see. Is that correct? No. Oh. Yeah, okay. So, let's see what else we have. We have, maybe we could do something like that, open up this diagonal, and, eventually might be able to capture that pawn. Oh. Okay. So I get it. This isn't going to be like a game-winning position or anything, but if you capture this pawn, well, you just captured a pawn. So if the queen recaptures, then you push this pawn, that bishop and the queen are being attacked, so you have to move that queen somewhere, either here or there, and, we just capture that bishop, right? Wait, does that make sense? Because then queen just captures back. But, huh. Okay. I don't... That's definitely not that. Oh, it is? But, yeah, maybe it's just a better position. Let's look back at that. So, we capture here, and then we just capture back. But, how is this really better? Are we... Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And our opponent has all 8 of their pawns. Yeah, they're up a pawn, a full pawn. I mean, I guess a human would most likely want to play black a little bit better. I'm surprised that the engine is fine with it, but, let's just do this real quickly. When you do that, you have lost several tempi, or several moves, just to try and keep your queen. And, white has overextended quite a bit. These pawns are very weak. That can be captured at any time, even though, you might have to do some stuff like that. But black's pawn structure is a little bit overextended. This is a doubled pawn, and I don't... Oh, yeah. Wait, can they? Hold on. I'm not sure they can actually castle in this position, so... No, they can. I mean, that's interesting. Okay, let's see how the engine handles this. Well, the king is very open, that's a given, but there has to be something more concrete. Is it like more development is happening? Huh. Okay. I mean, I guess it's more of an attacking position. Well, this puzzle is fine, I guess, but it's not really. Maybe in the hands of a grandmaster it would be, completely winning or something, but for us, I don't think that's gonna work out too well. And this one's a similar one. It's not giving white too much advantage. So, I'm still gonna try. We'll see. Maybe capture here, 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 and then, something. No. No. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just do another one. Oh, it actually was. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, now the king's a little bit opened up, even though this isn't, like, winning by any means. I guess it's a better position, but it's definitely a draw with perfect play, so I don't know why this is a, puzzle. But I did get it correct, so I'm going to take that as a win. Let's do... let's talk about opposition. That's important. So opposition is when you have a king directly opposite another king. There's exactly 1 square of distance between them. You can have a diagonal opposition if the king was here and the king was here. You can have direct opposition when the king is here and the king is here. But when you have direct opposition, you put your opponent into something called zugzwang. Sukswang is when your opponent's king has to move away from the file. So let's do it. Yeah, as you can see, the king has to move away from here because the king controls all three of these squares. And now if we move our king here, well, let's see. If we move our king here, and we protect, not these squares, you protect those squares, then the opponent's king will have to try and gain opposition, but then we just move that pawn. And so let's go into the analysis board. So what we did, let's review opposition. We moved directly in front of our opponent's king and forced the king to make a move. The only piece on the board that the king is there, the only piece on the board that the black has is the king, so they have to move. And they want to prevent this pawn from reaching the 8th file and queening. We can talk about some basic piece checkmates a little bit, but opposition? Yeah, I feel like we're just jumping from topic to topic. Forks, pins, Sukswang. You know, we're getting a little bit crazy, but, you know, once we've gained opposition, once we have exactly 1 square's distance between our king and the opponent king has to move somewhere, right? And why would they move closer to the 8th rank and let white control more space? So they're probably going to move here, and then when the king moves here, they are controlling all of these squares, right? So black might try to, move here and stop this from happening, but it's still going to happen, right? The king is controlling this square. The king has all of these like squares in their range of motion, so it's protecting this pawn. And now, look at this sad position for the black king. They either have to move back, or they have to, just give up. Because you want to prevent this, right? But you can't stop the pawn like that. So let's go back to how this computer will play. So we go here, and this one's another opposition. We force the king away from here because they have to move. They can't just not move. That's called Sukswang, when your opponent would rather not play a move than play one. And so once your king is moved from the defense of this square, you immediately take it with your king. And then you just push, push, push. And this one is considered this is a draw, right? So usually I say play for the checkmate, especially if you're a beginner like me. Play for the checkmate as much as you can until you literally cannot play for the checkmate any further. Only resign when you are down like 10 points of material. Resign when you have no chance. Don't resign when you have these like slight disadvantages, because I mean, it's just not worth it, When you're playing people of a similar level and you are not like particularly good or anything, I mean, I blunder a lot and my opponents blunder a lot, so I just have to, say I will just keep on doing this. So, let's see. We have to hold the draw. I'm just going to stop this. Oh, yeah, I gave too much. You stop here, and, you can either go here or here. Pawn controls these 2 squares because they're diagonal, and, yeah. That's funny. They didn't make that a queen, so you can under-promote. You don't have to do a queen, but, the queen is most likely going to be what you're doing unless you accidentally stalemate your opponent. Stalemate's kind of like checkmate, except it's a draw, because if your opponent cannot make a legal move and they are not being attacked, then you have not checkmated them, and your opponent cannot play. So if you have not won, and your opponent cannot play further for a win, then nobody's won, which is why a stalemate is a draw. So a stalemate's just when you have no legal moves and you are not in check. So yeah, let's keep this king away from... So we just have to... And, we can capture that bishop. But the joke of that one was that knights and bishops by themselves cannot checkmate the opponent king. If you have a king and a knight, you cannot checkmate. If you have a king and a bishop, and no other pieces, you cannot checkmate. But if you have a king, a bishop, and a knight, you can checkmate. If you have a king and a rook, you can checkmate. King and a queen, you can checkmate. King and a pawn that is about to queen, then you can checkmate. But yeah, most of the time, like here, you do only have a pawn, but you can promote your pawn. Oof, what did that do? Oh, yeah, you need to force your opponent into where you want them to go, into that position that we were originally in, and then this is just relatively easy. And we can kind of briefly go over queen checkmates. You want to constrict your opponent's movement as much as possible, so usually I go for the knight opposition. This is like a term for you have the queen go in the same position as a knight. So if your queen was a knight, you just if your queen was a knight, you just move it to a square that it would check if it was a knight. And so from here, as you can see, we're slowly constricting this box a little bit. Now this box is only this large because the queen controls this. So let me just draw all of the squares that the king can move. And so we just constrict them further. So we can only travel here. And then we can even constrict them a little bit further. And then I do here. Now the king can only move across here, but it also cannot move across here. The queen controls these two. And then you can also, if you can't move here, you can't move anywhere here, right? So you only have these three squares, which means that the king can come closer and closer. And then, you can have a little bit of flair. You can checkmate like that. You can checkmate like that. I prefer, checkmating like this. But, yeah, we're going to do some queen and king checkmates in a little bit. And how they work. But, oh, okay. So, let's see the square. I think we have to do this correctly. Man. Okay, so we have this, right? And we have to move with opposition. We have to force our opponent king to move further and further away. And then once they have moved off the file that our pawn is on, we simply defend as many squares leading to the queening square as we can. And yeah, this is just easy queening. And let's look at this next one. So we need to defend our pawn, and if we draw a square of our pawn right here, I was under the assumption that this would be a win, because if we somehow manage to just kind of get within the square, something, we'll see. Oh, our opponent gains opposition first. Yeah, forcing us to go behind our pawn, which means that we can't actually push it any further. Yeah. Okay, so let's do this one more time. We have this position right here. We need to gain opposition. We need to force their opponent king either away from the pawn so that we can actually capture it, or we force it into the defense of this pawn, in which case we can just push our pawn. Ooh, that was a big blunder, yeah. So when we do this, if we captured here, we allow our opponent to gain opposition, which is a big no-no. You want to control how your opponent moves as much as possible. So whenever you gain opposition, you should, because you force your opponent to either go left or right. And let's go to the original position. Let's go to the original position. We went here to gain opposition. We have to force the king to move somewhere, because if they just capture there, we can capture there. Let's actually make sure if that's correct. We go here, then they go there, then yeah, we just capture. And, and we just gain opposition, right? And, you know, we can just kind of play this out. Or, not there, because then we just gave the black king opposition, but we just continue to give opposition. And, you know, we guard those 3 squares, and then king can try, but, you know, they will just eventually be checkmated because we force them out of that queening square, and then we just, you know, defend that area. So yeah, I got this puzzle wrong several times, but it's definitely not as difficult as it might seem. You just need to force your opponent to move. If they ever move their pawn, you can capture it. And it might be, you know, difficult to know when you are drawing and when you are winning, but always, always, always try to keep opposition as much as possible. So we do that. We have opposition, and then they capture, and then, you know, we can continue keeping opposition, forcing that king backwards, and, oh, man, we keep giving him opposition. Yeah, that's just my fault. Now I need to do this all over again. Continue keeping opposition as much as possible, and, you know, good things will happen, right? Huh. Okay, I don't want to, like, stalemate them or anything. Yeah, no, we're fine. Yeah, now we just guard this. Oh. Yeah, that would have hurt in, like, an actual game. So yeah, even though they've gained opposition, we just move our king somewhere. They move there, and we can't move there because they'll move there. Huh. Oh. Yeah, now we can, you know, just move this and queen. Okay, we will get this, right? In opposition as much as we can. After here, and then gain opposition further. Force the opponent king backwards. Okay. Once we get to that position, I'll just be careful, okay? Again, we're trying to keep opposition as much as possible, force the king as back as possible. Okay, so we can go there. King cannot go there. That's being controlled. So let's look at all the squares that are being controlled right now. We have all of these squares are being controlled, which means they only the opponent king only has these squares. So if you move here, the opponent king can only move there, right? And that might be stalemate, because, you know, if we move there, then the opponent king can't move anywhere. And if they have no legal moves, that's a draw. So I think maybe it's there. Let's see. Yeah. No, it has to be, right? Oh, what? Why did I do that? Okay. No, let's see. Okay. Well, let's just not do that. Okay, let's see. If we have there for there, then we have some stuff going on. Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, that's... I was thinking I needed to sacrifice, but we do this. King will go there, we go here. You know, you can definitely checkmate with a rook and a king, but it's probably better to have this pawn endgame. Now, how are we going to win? We gain opposition, right? And we just further gain opposition, and this is just winning. Oh, whoops. Yeah, now we gain opposition. Yeah, and just to, wait, let me show you how to checkmate with a rook. This is going to be a little bit more difficult, but you also want to just follow the same rules as we did with the queen. Constrict your opponent as much as possible until they get to the opposite rank. So our opponent made a little bit of a mistake. They went further back one, but they should just keep, walking around here, and we just come closer and closer with our king, and this is another example of opposition, right? So let's just force the king back until eventually they'll have to come closer to us, and they did. And from here, if we check, look at how many squares are being controlled by the king, right? We have all of these squares are being controlled by the king, and if we check, then all of these squares are going to be attacked by the rook, which means that the opponent king has to move back further. So when we check, we just gain opposition, and we could just well, let's do a bit of a waiting move. You want this like diagonal between your two kings, and you just force it until eventually you have opposition. King controls these squares, the white king controls these squares, so if you check, then there's no place for the black king to move, and that's going to be checkmate. So, yeah, let's try. Okay, we can try this one last time. If I don't get it this time, I think I'm going to stop this video. Because I can do this, I know I can do this. I've definitely done, I've played endgames like this before, but you just keep opposition as much as you can, right? Okay, so if we go here, can't go there, I'll probably go there. Oh, yeah, now it's checkmate, because, so the point of this was we cannot push this pawn. That will be stalemate. Pawn will control this square, king will control these squares. So you have to kind of give up opposition, but this will be beneficial opposition, because when we move here, then we're able to defend that square, and then this is just checkmate. Yeah, we can play with the bishop. I guess it just won't let us, but let's play distant opposition. Alright, we do need to, so distant opposition is when there's an odd number of squares between the king and the other king. Direct opposition is when there's only one square, so if this was the king and this was the king, only one square. But distant opposition is when there's just an odd number of squares, so that's distant opposition. We'll just kind of go back and forth until we capture the pawn and there's nothing to play. Okay, so how many squares do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we take opposition. We take another opposition. Oh. Oh, we need to continue taking opposition. What should we attack? I think, yeah, this is winning. Oh, yeah, no, because we need to gain distant opposition one more time. Yeah, okay. Let's do this one last time. So, distant opposition. I was just playing at that point. I wasn't really explaining. Distant opposition is when you have an odd number of squares, and you want to take distant opposition. You do not want to let your opponent take distant opposition. So if you have the opportunity, there are 6 squares in between me and my opponent, and I want to take distant opposition. So I make it 5, and then from here, now it's 4, and I can make it 3, right? And diagonal opposition also works. I can make this, well, I can't make this 2, but I can continue, no, not there, because then my opponent will take opposition, right? I just have to let my opponent make another move. So, let's see. Let me re-say this. So, we have our king can take distant opposition. There will be 5 squares, so an odd number of squares. Then we take opposition one more time. Now our opponent does not want us to continue taking more space, so they move horizontally. That means that we can actually just move horizontally as well. We continue taking opposition, either forcing them closer or forcing them away. And now from here, we force the opponent all the way over here. Now we can start targeting this pawn because we are going to be closer to it. Let's think 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. We will be closer, which means that we can capture it, and then we try to defend this square, and our opponent will try to capture there, but we will be much quicker. And yeah, as a means to an end. Okay, so I'm thinking no, okay. So yeah, we let our opponent take this as opposition. Take opposition again. Let's see what squares we control. We control all of these squares and this. So if we, move there, then our opponent will take opposition once more. Ooh. Ah, no, we do have to take opposition again. Okay, so what's the best move here? You can't move there because king will obviously capture. So from here, now we can take opposition, and now we can win. I forgot. Okay, now we can win. Let me just push our pawn through. Let's do one last rook practice real quick. So again, try to constrict your king. We'll do this one more time correctly. Try to constrict your opponent's king. Oh, they're just continually giving this up. Okay. If they want to give us more space, we're not going to complain. And then we go here. And then, we have taken opposition or forced our opponent into our opposition. So when we check, they have to move downwards. And then, we just we make a waiting move because we want to have this diagonal between our kings. So that eventually, once it reaches the A file or the H file, our opponent will have to go the opposite direction, and we will be on this square. And then that's just checkmate. So let's do this one last time. We have opposition. We let our opponent take opposition, and when we do, we are able to eventually take opposition of our own. And now, once we've taken opposition, so let's go through every single move that we've done so far. We let our opponent take opposition, right? We moved in front of the place so that our opponent could take opposition, forcing us, quote unquote, forcing us to an undesirable square, even though we do want to be on this square, to continue protecting our pawn for this much. So once we push that king, now we take opposition from them. And, they can't move here because, let's even pause. So we move here. All of these squares will be covered, and then this square will also be covered. And the black king wants to remain close to the action. If they just continue going offwards, then they're admitting defeat. So they'll have to go up, and so we'll take another opposition. Or, well, at that point, it'll be a draw if we continue taking opposition, but we do need to push. And let's look at what happens when we push. We control all of these squares. Well, not all of these. But, our king can move there, but we will just move there, and then we will be defending the queening square. That's the most important thing. You need to defend the queening square. But, yeah, we push this pawn, and then the black king, it wants to remain close to the action to have drawing chances, but, there is no drawing chances. We take opposition. We force the king off of the queening square, which means that we can immediately jump in with our king, defend that queening square, and then our king also defends that pawn, so we can just go from there. Alright, let's try this direct opposition one last time. So we have here, 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 here. Okay. And we want to take opposition, and then we want to take this pawn out the way. So, yeah, now that we've taken opposition, this is just what we've been doing. We'll just, capture them here. And, yeah, let's take, let's do some more learning. 7th rank rook pawn versus a queen. Okay, so you need to make it sure that if you have an opponent with a pawn that is very close to queening, and you just need to make sure that you are playing accurately. Because if your opponent ever gets to queen their own pawn, most of the time, it'll be a draw. If you have 2 queens on the board and 2 kings, it will be a draw, unless there's some, very specific position. But you need to make sure that you can win instead of draw. So you have to play very accurately. So you do not want the opponent's king to get anywhere close to the key squares. So I'm not sure. I mean, I won't lie and pretend that I'm like great with key squares and like seeing these ones, but you just don't want to have a draw. You want to win, which means that, yeah, immediately. Well, I think that was okay. Alright, still winning. Okay, whatever. So you protect the queening square by just putting your queen in front of it, and then you just force the opponent's king away eventually by using opposition. And we could just do this one really quickly. Again, take knight opposition, move like a knight, like move as if you were a knight trying to check the king. I thought that my move was going to work, but I mean, the eval bar went up to like 99, which means that there was a chance to checkmate. But, let's do this one last time. You just put the queen in front of the queening square, and the king cannot, enter anything. Because, let's do that one more time. The king cannot come closer. It cannot, come around because this square is also covered by the queen. So, the king either moves away and loses, or the king stays there and loses. So we just take opposition, and then we're able to take the pawn with the queen or with the king, it doesn't matter, and then we just we checkmate. You can even do that, let's look at this one more time. You can do that opposition thing with the queen, because the queen controls all of these squares, so you have to move here, but you actually can't move there because the queen moves there. But if the queen is defended by the king, you force the king backwards. So let's continue. Then we just all right. Get your queen closer to the black king and pawn without letting black promote. Okay. So we do need to check. And we force the king away from here. If the king ever moves here, then, we'll just check. And, yeah. If they move there, then, there's just no point. And now we just come closer. Oh, like this? Let's see. What's the thing telling us to do? Let's go back. So check. We force the king away from the pawn, which is great. And then we force the king to try and defend it, which means that the king has to move. So we just continue bringing the king closer. We'll pin it so that this pawn can never be pushed. And then, every time black attempts to do stuff, we have to threaten the pawn, threaten to capture. And then, black will be forced to come in, and we'll just come inching closer and closer. You just keep pinning that pawn, and checking, and forcing the black king, eventually you'll have to force the black king to protect it, and then that gives you an extra move. And then eventually, you'll be able to capture, because the king will eventually be able to defend that queen. Okay. You can't do that because if you ever go here, that will be checkmate. There's no legal. Well, actually, that's not checkmate, but you know. Yeah. Now, king has to go there. Then you just go there. Okay. This is another similar looking one. We'll just put this in a position that we're familiar with. Force the king underneath, which means that we can move our queen closer, pin the pawn. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Yeah, now, I know how to do this. I mean, we just did this, but this time we're doing it without help. So, we check. We, you know, we kind of inch a little bit closer. Or we threaten. Okay, what am I doing? Okay, I can do this, I promise. We check, force the king back, we threaten the pawn, force the king to, you know, defend it, check it here, and then we force the king over there, which means that we can move the king closer. We have this pin, so that pawn cannot move, and then we force the king over there, which means that we can check. Yep, and then, you know, we force the king back underneath the pawn. Oh, whoops. Yeah, I mean, it's not like losing or anything, but, you know. Now we just pin the pawn again, check again, check, and then, what was it again? Oh, we check, force the pawn, force the king underneath the pawn, pin the pawn again, you know, push the, oh, we can't push the king closer just yet. We have to check, check, check one more time, pin the pawn, keep the king underneath the pawn so that we win another free move, pin the pawn again, and now we just capture. And we take this opposition with the queen, so we do knight opposition now, so we get that, and our opponent went to the last file, which means that we can go here, and then, nice and easy. Okay, I think this is a similar, like, strategy. Just check, threaten, check, threaten, check, free square, pin, check, free square, check, 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 force the king underneath, free square, pin, check, free square, and check, yeah, okay, check, threaten, oh, and then just take, because our opponent knows that this is not going to work for much longer. Take knight opposition, continue taking knight opposition, and, you know, once you have that queen on that last file or last rank, you are golden. Just push your king, and checkmate. Rook pawn with no king assistance. Okay, so this is a drawn position. I mean, I think, you know, might be just a queen, right? Yeah. Oh, you don't want to stalemate. But I mean, you know, regardless, once you get here, you will either get stalemated or you just, you know, get checked for infinity. So, yeah. And you can't, well, we'll do it in practice, I think. I'm not sure if they actually said it or not, but let's just do that real quick. You need to threaten to promote, so you fall underneath, because, I mean, there's no way you're going to win this. But you just need to draw, so you just keep going back and forth. And, like, there's a certain position where if the queen checks and we're here, like, maybe if the queen was over there, then that would be a checkmate. So we can't let that happen, but I don't think that's going to be allowed. We'll see. Yeah, okay, here it is. So if you move here, then the queen can move there, and there are no legal squares for the king, so that would have been checkmate. But yeah, you just keep on following the same pattern. This is with check, so now you have this really nice kings kind of looking at each other. But yeah, okay. So we have this right here. This is the same kind of system. This is a draw though, because if we ever take that pawn, there'll be no. If you ever take that pawn, it'll just be a draw, like by insufficient material. Okay, pin the pawn, and then keep doing this. And then just, we can, keep trying. So, get the pawn underneath get the king underneath the pawn. Angel, just pin, just what we've been doing so far. And, if you ever do that, that would just be very quick stalemate. But, there's no wrong moves. This is just a draw. But, yeah. And then, there's nothing to play for. Okay, so I'm not going to waste our time any further. But, we have to try and draw this. So, just kind of, oops. Obviously, you just need to have, if there's 2 queens on the board, it's automatically a draw, unless there's some really crazy stuff happening. But, okay, I think we're just going to do a couple more of these. At a certain point, I don't think that this is particularly anything. I'm just kind of doing puzzles at this point. But, if this is entertaining for some reason, then, I mean, no offense, but you are very easily entertained. Is the pawn going this way? Okay. So, KC1 drops the pawn and loses immediately, so you have to go 1. Ah, okay. Yeah, so if you go here, then you just fall into that checkmate. If you go here, you fall into this checkmate. You go here, I don't know what checkmate. It's definitely the annoying one. Oh, and then you just try to control this square. And, let's see. Now, no, I want to be flamboyant, okay? I want to win like this. Alright, let's try this out. So, we need to check, or, do we need to check? Yeah, we need to check. We can't just go immediately, so... Let's see, I think it's here? No, Queen F1. Oh, yeah, we just did this. Queen F1, and then, like, maybe here? Yeah, oof. How sad. Let's do that one more time. Okay, so we have to check. We have to check. Oh, and they just gave it up, so that's fine. And then, we can do knight opposition. Alright. Okay, let's do... I mean, most of these are relatively similar, but let's just do a couple more. So if they go back, then I'll be checkmate there. So we enter. Haha, very funny. Okay, so we need to get our queen and our rook in. Oh, whoops. We need to get our queen and our, queen and our king in a similar position. So, let's attempt to do so. I'm not sure if this is still winning. It might be. Yeah, I think it is. You still have to go back, and then, maybe you can do something like that. Yeah, that's still winning. So, I'll just explain my thought process behind that. So, when I was in this position, I, inched forward with my king, and then I forced the king back here. Cannot go here because that would be checkmate. So, if the king was back here, and we checked him, those squares are all unavailable. This square is immediately unavailable because he got checkmated, so they have to go here. And then, I push the king forward. Again, you can't go here because all of these squares are covered by the queen. And then from here, I just fall underneath the pawn, and then, we take it. Constrict the king a little bit. Take some knight opposition. Last file, and then, same old, same old. Okay. This one's interesting. We need to force black in front of their own pawn. Threaten, check, force, get another move in, and then, we could just capture. Okay, let's explain what was happening. So we did the same thing. We check. We want this king to either be underneath the pawn or just away from the pawn so that we can capture. So we did all of this. We checked, got the king away, threatened, we attack, or check, then we pin, or not pin just yet, but we have to pin once the king gets over here, and then we pin the pawn like that. If the king moves here, we just, capture, or actually I'm not sure if this would be check, stalemate or not. In fact, it probably is stalemate. Yeah, that would be an interesting... Let's just analyze that real quickly. What would be the best way to handle this? Analyze. So right here, let's see what would happen if king went to a1. So what would be the best move? Yeah, now it's mate. But no, I forgot that the king could just move back to the pawn. Okay, so same checks all happening. We just have to inch slowly, gain as much tempo as possible, and just keep on getting closer. that's just easy. Okay. Let's see. Check. Get closer and closer to the pawn. We just need to do that. Oh. Whoops. Oh, because you don't want the pawn to get any closer to there. So, what? Why did I do that? Pin. Get closer with the king. Or whatever. Let's do that one more time. We check. Oops. We check. I can do this. We check. Get that pawn. King underneath. Huh. I don't know why that's not bad. Well, I mean, you know. Okay. So let's just check. Then we need to pin. Now we just get closer. Capture. Okay, let's do this one last time. So we check. We want to get this. Oh, God. We need to get this queen within the general range. So we check. We constrict the king's movement, force him over there, and then we check one more time. Force him back underneath, and then just to get the king, just to completely block any chance of the queen promoting, we check there, and yeah, we can just kind of, go from here. Let's see. Actually, we do need to check, force the king back underneath. But why? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Oh, queen b2, pin the pawn, and then you could do that. I was wondering what I was forgetting, but yeah, let's do that one more time. We check, get the king underneath, get closer. So there, check one more time. Check, and then pin the pawn. That was the most important thing. Now we just get closer, and then we can play this. And we could do knight opposition. Okay. So force the black king to block their own pawn. So we have to check them one more time. Check. If they go there, then so let's just okay. Okay, so these are just the exact same, but very slightly different. You just need to check, know when to check, get your queen as close to the enemy king as you can without stalemating, and pin the pawn so that it can't actually promote. That's all we need to do whenever we're in these kinds of positions. And if you ever do somehow get into one of these positions as a relative beginner, then, congratulations, you've played clearly a very interesting game. But, yeah, just kind of, well, this is, just taking opposition. But, what? That's checkmate too. Okay, whatever. But, yeah, you just need to, for these kinds of rook-pawn endgames, you just need to check as much as possible so that you get your queen as close to your king as you can, as the enemy king as you can, and then pin the pawn so that it can't promote. And eventually, once your enemy king can't defend it anymore, either because you have your queen blocking it off, or because you have your king defending your queen so that it can take it, then you just take it, and then you checkmate. And I think we should probably... Oh, whoops. I don't know what that was. We were literally just talking about how you're supposed to handle this. Ta-da. Okay, so let's do some... Let's go straight back to the early stuff, and let's do some checkmates. Piece checkmates. We do need to talk about the ladder mate. This is not the greatest chess video. Yeah, no, this is very much not a great chess video. Oof, almost missed that one up. Yeah, no, I'm not the greatest with these kinds of ones. I know you should probably go for something like that. But these kinds of ladder mates, that's what this is called. You just move your pieces so that they make a kind of ladder. They move exactly one up, so you can kind of think of each file as like a rung in that ladder. I know it's kind of a weird term because it doesn't look like a ladder, but I'll do this the way you're supposed to do it. Oh, whoops, not there. You have to do it rook here. You force the king back, and once you have like this file controlled and you've checked the king, then the king must move backwards. That's the whole point of the ladder mate. Move back, and then checkmate here, because if you control this rank and this rank, the enemy king cannot move anywhere. So that's the ladder mate. It's definitely the most important mate for beginners. I am not the best at bishop mates. I know kind of what you're supposed to do, but yeah, I've never been good at them. I would like to get good at them, but you know, it's definitely gonna be a bit of a journey. Yeah, like what am I doing right now? I'm just going in a circle, but you know, there's definitely a way to do this correctly, but I am not good at these. In fact, most of the time, if I'm ever in these positions, I just actually kind of sacrifice my bishop and then just do the queen checkmate that I know. So, yeah, I mean, that's not how you're supposed to play chess, but that's how I play chess because, you know, again, we have to play like barbarians. So, bring that back. Okay. Queen and knight mate. I'm actually even worse with the queen and knight mate than I am with the queen and bishop mate. Rook mate, we can... I mean, if you have a queen and knight, like, do the simpler option. I mean, I know I'm, like, giving you bad advice, but I just personally prefer, you know, rook and queen checkmates. I think they're a lot more interesting looking because you only have two pieces, yet you can checkmate the king. So, yeah, we can just kind of go through that very quickly. We try to constrict the space of the king, right? This is the same as the queen mate, but with the rook, you have to take opposition with your white king, and then force the black king back. So you constrict the space of the king, going there, and our opponent didn't do what they're supposed to do. They're just supposed to inch back and forth along this line, and eventually, you know, get to where they need to go. But since they gave us some space, we'll take some space. And they are now doing what they want to do, which is just go back and forth until we force them to do otherwise. So we move forward with our king, and now we have this diagonal. So we just push like that, and then eventually, once the king is here and we are here, the king will be forced to move there, and then we can take opposition. But let's see. Oh, they just gave up, and they were, okay, let's come back here. And what's happening is white king has opposition. All three of these squares are controlled, and these two squares are being attacked by the king. I mean, by the rook. So you have to go backwards, either here or here or here. The most resilient one is just, you know, going backwards immediately. But and this was a waiting move. I saw that we did not have our king on the same like rank, and we also didn't have it on the same diagonal. So a waiting move like this is just to allow the king to either move back here and let us checkmate immediately, or move back here so we have that diagonal that we were talking about. And so they moved back here to get that diagonal, and then we just follow them back, force them up the board once they hit that point, and then checkmate here. Again, white king has opposition, and we just deliver checkmate. This is actually a much longer video than I anticipated, and it wasn't a very good video. I don't think I explained too much of what I was thinking, and we jumped from how the pieces move to, like, Sook Swang and all sorts of crazy stuff, so this was pretty random, but I hope you enjoyed it, you know. A lot to love about chess. I love it. I play it a little bit too much, but I just enjoy it so much. It's a beautiful game, you know. Like, it's very simple. It's also very complex, obviously, but it's simple to understand how to play. And the barrier of entry is much lower than you'd think. I think anybody can be, at the very least, okay at chess. They might not be grandmasters or masters anytime soon, but if you understand how the pieces move, you understand the principles, like... Oh wait, did I not even talk about the principles? Ooh, that's not good. Principles. Let's go through them very quickly. Pass pawn. Yeah, no, this is not good. Let's just say we have King's Gambit. Or that's not correct way to play the King's Gambit. Now you play h5, and then you know, let's just say we play some crazy moves. And this is a passed pawn. There's no pawns on the ranks or the files directly next to it, so there's nothing to contest it. If there was a pawn, say right here, then it could attack. If there's a pawn right here, say it could attack. But there is no pawns, and even for black, they have a passed pawn as well. But there is no pawns to contest this white pawn, so let's just, you know, we can even play like that. And the principle that I was trying to demonstrate is that you should always keep a rook or a queen behind your passed pawn, because your opponent, if they do not want to see two queens on the board at the same time, they're going to have to sacrifice a piece to stop it. Let's make sure our opponent doesn't know what they're doing at all. Let's say they made some ridiculous move. Now you just, you know, push your pawn and you win, right? Queens are special because, you know, you can just defend that queening square. But the point of a rook behind a passed pawn, and why rooks are such good pieces for endgames, is because if you have a rook right here and you have a pawn right here, the king will not be able to move because then you'll just push. And that square is being eyed by the rook or the queen or whatever. So when you have a rook, always put it behind your passed pawn. A passed pawn is a pawn that doesn't have any pawns to the files to the left or to the right of it. Or if it does, it is past him. So if there was two pawns right there, they cannot contest this white pawn, so that would be a passed pawn. That white pawn would be a passed pawn. So always keep your rooks behind passed pawns. Development over materials, always important, but don't sacrifice meaninglessly. Control the center. I think I very briefly talked about this. One of my favorite openings for white... Yeah, I mean, I like this opening for everybody, but it's called the Evans Gambit. So this is the Italian game, or the gioco piano. So this is the gioco piano. Sorry, this is the Italian game when you bring your knight to c4, and this is that. And you could also, you know, play like this. Oops, and target that pawn a little bit. But there's, like, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff. But if your opponent plays this, you know, also developing pieces, a gambit is when you sacrifice a little bit of material to gain some type of advantage in development. And so let's look at how many moves black loses. We have one move for this bishop to c5. we play one move, bishop wastes another move just to get to b4. We play c3, bishop wastes another move just to get to a5, and then, well, bam, we have controlled the center. Look at how many squares, I mean, if you just ignore this pawn, look at how many squares our pawns control. This is controlling the center, and Evans Gambit's so good because you can just, you can develop your queen right here, and look at all that pressure just on that pawn. And your king's really bare, but this is how chess should be played. Control the center, development over material. We gambited a pawn, but we have so much more development, right? We have the queen developed, we have our bishop developed, we have this aiming here, we have the center being very nicely controlled, the knight ready to come here, bishop can come out here, we can castle. There's so much we can do already. And black's development is very cramped. You can't really move here because we'll just take it. You have to defend this pawn because if you don't, then you are very quickly lost. And you have to be on the defense as black. So I like the Evans Gambit for that reason. It's just a lot of it's really kind of emblematic of what chess is about. Evans Gambit and Gambits in general, they follow the principle of development of material. And the Evans Gambit's like the perfect example of that. Even though, black is technically winning, you have negative 0.4, it's just the perfect example of why Gambits and quote-unquote sacrifices work. Because you have to get development, you have to have all of your pieces, and you have to use all of those 16 pieces. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I personally like Gambits and that kind of play. But you have three main principles that I think everybody should play. Keep your rook behind a passed pawn, development over material, and don't develop your queen too early, and then you're golden. I think that's pretty much everything you need to know. And just one word of advice, and this is not something that I follow myself. I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I am obsessed with the idea of a beautiful game, right? I want to have these insane combinations of move after move of pins and skewers and double attacks and all sorts of crazy stuff, and I want to have beautiful games. But at your level and at my level, because we are at the same level, this is blind leading the blind, at our level, the only time you should play a move is when you know what you are doing. When I first started playing chess, my dad told me that I should just play and then figure it out from there. But I think now that I know a good bit more about chess, every time you make a move, I think at least for some of your games, maybe if you're playing online, if you're playing in person, maybe if you're playing in person this might be rude, but if you're playing online, make a move and say what you wanted to do with that. You play e4, you control the center. e5 stops further. And write down what your opponent is trying to do with their moves too. Knight f3, attack the e5 pawn. Knight f3, attack the e5 pawn. Knight c6, defend the e5 pawn. Bishop b5, attack the defender of the e5 pawn. And then, knight f6, develop your pieces. Just give descriptions of what each player is trying to do, what they want to accomplish. And if you understand both what you are doing, and if you have a plan for attack, if you know what you are doing, and you know what your opponent is doing, how they're trying to defend, how they're trying to attack, then you should just be able to win. Not every game, obviously. You will find players who are better than you, who are stronger than you, and that's just okay, You don't have to be Magnus Carlsen. You don't have to be Vishwanathan. You don't have to do anything. You just need to play, and you need to have fun. That's the only requirement. So, yeah, just know what your opponent is doing. Know what you are doing. Come up with some plans for attack. Again, the point of chess, the whole point of the game, is to checkmate your opponent. Doesn't matter how you do it. If you can do it, you should do it. So don't start playing random moves that you don't know what you what are you trying to achieve, right? What are you playing for? Sure, you're defending this bishop, but why? You need to know what you are doing. Otherwise, you will not be a very good player, and I think everybody has the capacity to be a good player. So yeah, I think, if you are beginning at chess, just write down what you are doing. What move did you make? Why did you make it? And then write down what your opponent made, what they did, why they're doing it, and then you just once you know what you are doing, what your opponent's doing, you're gonna win. Well, you're at least gonna win a lot more games than you currently are. So, yep, that was a master class. If you know, it was taught by a non-master. But I'm hoping that you saw some of the principles that you need to know. You at least know by now how pieces move. You know how pins work, how forks work, how endgame should kind of be played. Just try to get a queen. That's all you need to know for the endgame. And there's obviously so much more to chess than just what I've said. And in fact, even my video, regardless of how long it is, it's not a very good one. It hasn't gone into enough depth. But yeah, you just follow those important principles and you attack and don't care about beauty. At least not yet. Just play like a barbarian. Play as if though you just want to win. And you will. So I think that's a pretty good place to stop. If you like this video, please comment down below. If you did not like this video, constructive criticism is always encouraged. And if you're not in the mood for constructive criticism or a comment, then you can, I don't know, do some supine stretches. There we go. All right, what's the album recommendation? Actually don't know. Yeah, no, I'll come up with something. But yeah, that was chess. I'm not even gonna title this as how to understand chess. This is just an introduction to the ideas in chess. But yeah, that was fun for me. Probably not fun for any other person, but All right, bye.